My friends, we gather here for a very simple purpose: to turn within and discover what has always been present, though hidden behind centuries of misunderstanding. Nearly every form of human suffering, every fear, every unanswered prayer, every sense of abandonment has arisen from one foundational mistake. Humanity has believed that God is somewhere else. We have imagined a God far above the earth, a God who must be reached through effort, a God who must be convinced to notice us, to bless us, to act on our behalf. And as long as we hold this belief, we remain wanderers in a spiritual desert, searching for water that flows only from the well within. You see, the great tragedy is not that God is distant, but that we have accepted the belief in distance. The presence that Jesus revealed was not a deity dwelling in the sky, but the living reality at the center of your own being. And so long as we look outward with our eyes, with our emotions, with our hopes, we pass by the very source we seek. This misconception has shaped religions, shaped theology, shaped our prayers, shaped our fears. Yet Jesus, with such gentleness, turned our attention in another direction when he said, "The kingdom of God is within you." It was as if he were saying, "Look no farther. Stop your searching. The one you long for is already here." Joel Goldsmith, throughout all his teaching years, gave only one message in countless forms, and it was this: God is not out there. The infinite is not separate from you. The very consciousness by which you hear these words, the very life that beats your heart, is the presence of God expressed as your being. Everything we do today begins with this recognition. Not belief, not hope, but recognition. For to the degree that you believe God is elsewhere, to that degree you experience separation, and to the degree that you recognize God as the essence of your own life, you begin to awaken to the truth that has been present all along. So let us begin here, quietly, honestly, without strain. Let us acknowledge that perhaps the problem has never been that God is silent, but that we have been listening in the wrong direction. Let us open ourselves to the possibility that the kingdom we have pursued with such effort is not a destination to reach, but a reality to uncover. The presence is here. The presence has never left. And as we move deeper into this teaching, you will find that the distance you have felt between yourself and God dissolves not by effort, but by realization. This is the beginning of our journey today. Let us continue now with the words that stand at the very foundation of all spiritual awakening. When Jesus declared, "The kingdom of God is within you," he was not offering poetry, nor metaphor, nor an elevated moral encouragement. He was speaking a literal, spiritual truth, one so revolutionary that even after 2,000 years, most of the world has not allowed itself to believe it. Humanity has searched for the kingdom in churches, in rituals, in holy places, in sacred books, in emotional experiences, and yet Jesus pointed quietly to an inner dimension that cannot be found by the senses at all. If the kingdom were something outward, you could find it with effort. You could walk to it, study your way into it, behave your way into it, repent your way into it. You could observe certain practices, follow certain rules, give certain offerings, and perhaps one day attain it. But Jesus denied all such notions with a single sentence: "The kingdom of God does not come with observation. You cannot see it with your eyes. You cannot locate it in a place. You cannot discover it in time, for it is already here, and it is already complete, residing not in the world around you, but in the depth of your own being." This is why so many seekers remain seekers. They strive outwardly for what exists inwardly. They pray for a God they imagine to be far away. They fast, hoping to attract divine attention. They plead for blessings, believing the kingdom must descend from heaven. But the Master said no such thing. He said the kingdom is within you now, not later, here, not elsewhere, present, not pending. The kingdom is not coming to you. It is waiting to be recognized. When Joel Goldsmith read these words, he understood their meaning not through intellect but through experience. He discovered, in the silence of meditation, that the presence Jesus spoke of was not separate from the life that animated him. And once he recognized this, the teachings of Jesus unfolded like a map, revealing the terrain of the inner world, the miracles, the healings. The peace that radiated from the Master were not supernatural demonstrations, but expressions of one who had realized his oneness with the infinite within. We, too, must come to this understanding if we are to awaken spiritually. The kingdom is not the reward for good behavior. It is not a place we enter after death. It is not a realm reserved for saints or mystics. The kingdom is the eternal presence of God, and it is present within every individual as their very being. It awaits only acknowledgement. It awaits recognition. And the moment you turn within, not with effort, but with openness, you begin to sense what Jesus knew so completely, that the Father and the kingdom are ever where you are. Let us hold this truth gently in consciousness. The kingdom is within, and if it is within, then nothing stands between you and God but belief. As we proceed, you will see that the entire spiritual life is not a journey toward God, but a journey away from the belief that God is elsewhere. As we move deeper into this unfolding truth, let us turn to the heart of Joel Goldsmith's realization, the insight that illuminated all his teaching and healing work. God is the very consciousness of the individual. This was not an intellectual conclusion he arrived at, nor a doctrine he inherited. It came to him in the silence, in those sacred moments when the human mind grows still enough for the infinite to reveal itself. Goldsmith discovered that the presence we call God does not act upon us from the outside. It is not a power traveling from heaven to earth, blessing one person and passing another. Rather, the presence lives as the core of our being, functioning as intelligence, as life, as awareness, as the very capacity by which we know anything at all. When you hear these words, when you breathe, when you become aware of your surroundings, the faculty that perceives is not separate from God. That perceiving consciousness is the activity of the infinite expressing through you. This insight is the cornerstone of his teaching. God is not a distant cause, nor a divine observer, nor a supernatural force somewhere beyond reach. God is the life that lives you. God is the mind that thinks through you when you surrender the personal sense of mind. God is the substance of your being, the essence of your awareness, the presence that goes before you and prepares every step of your path. Goldsmith understood that to recognize this is to stand in the same realization from which Jesus spoke, healed, and lived. It is important to understand what this means and what it does not mean. It does not mean that your human personality is God, nor that your ego has divine status. The human sense of self, with its fears and desires, its memories and insecurities, is not the God presence. But behind that personality, deeper than thought, deeper than emotion, lies the true I, the infinite, undivided consciousness that Jesus referred to when he said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." This I is not personal. It does not belong to any one person. It is the I of all being, individualized as you, Goldsmith emphasized this over and over because unless you understand that God is your own consciousness, you will continue to seek outwardly. You will try to reach a God who cannot be reached because you cannot reach what you already are. And so your prayers will be filled with effort. Your spiritual practices will be filled with striving, and your heart will be filled with longing for what has never been absent. To recognize that God is the consciousness of your being is the beginning of liberation. It frees you from the belief that you are a separate creature trying to find favor with a distant creator. It frees you from fear, for the presence that governs the universe is the presence that is living as you. It frees you from loneliness, for the infinite cannot be apart from its own expression. It frees you from dependence on external conditions, for everything external is but a form revealing the inner substance of consciousness. Goldsmith never sought to convince or to convert. He simply invited students to experience this truth within themselves. And when they did, something remarkable occurred. Their prayers changed, their fears dissolved, their relationships softened, their bodies responded, their lives began to harmonize, not because God intervened from above, but because the individual awakened to the truth that the kingdom, the presence, and the power were already functioning from within. This, then, is the meaning of God as your own consciousness. Not that you own God, but that God expresses through you as your very capacity to know, to perceive, to live. And as this becomes the center of your awareness, life itself becomes the classroom in which the infinite teaches you, moment by moment, that it has never been separate from its creation. Let us look now at the great obstacle, an obstacle not placed by God, not imposed by circumstance, and not rooted in reality at all, but arising from the human mind's own conditioning. This obstacle is the belief in separation. It is this belief, and only this belief, that creates the sensation that God is far away, that heaven is distant, that help must come from some power beyond ourselves. And yet, the truth is that God has never moved, God has never withdrawn, God has never withheld. What we experience as distance is nothing more than the mind's habit of seeing itself as a separate, isolated self. From birth, we are taught to identify with the body, the personality, the name, and the history attached to that name. We are taught to believe that we are independent creatures, existing apart from the source that formed us. And so the mind begins life with a fundamental error. It sees itself as the center of existence, and God as an outside power whose attention must be sought, whose favor must be earned, whose presence must be invoked. But the moment we accept this premise, we begin to live inside an illusion. For if you believe you are a separate self, you cannot help but believe in a separate God. And if you believe in a separate God, you cannot help but feel abandoned during moments of suffering, nor can you help but strive endlessly to reconnect with a presence that never left you. The human mind creates the very distance that it then tries desperately to overcome. Joel Goldsmith taught that the human or mortal mind is not an entity, but a bundle of conditioned beliefs, beliefs inherited from culture, religion, family, and collective consciousness. These beliefs create a picture of life in which you seem to stand here, and God seems to stand there. But this picture has no foundation in reality. It is a dream of separation. It is the dream from which we must awaken. The sense of separation shows itself in many subtle forms. It appears as fear, the fear that something can threaten us because we believe we are apart from the infinite life. It appears as guilt, The belief that we have offended a God outside of us, it appears as loneliness. The aching feeling that we exist as isolated beings craving connection, it appears as striving to be spiritual, striving to be worthy, striving to reach heaven, as though heaven were ever anywhere but within the depths of our own being. Yet Jesus never spoke of a God apart from us. He said, I am in the Father, and the Father in me, and he prayed that we would know the same truth, that they may be one, even as we are one. The unity is already there, but the human mind cannot see it because it believes in a self that has never been real. You see, the task is not to create oneness. The task is to dissolve the belief in twoness. When the mind's habitual identification with a separate self loosens, even for a moment, a great stillness opens, and in that stillness, the sense of separation begins to fade. You realize you are not standing apart from God, you are standing in God. You realize you are not searching for a presence, you are living as its expression. You realize that the very I you have been referring to your whole life is not the personal I, but the infinite I that was never born and will never die. Goldsmith often said that the spiritual path is not adding truth to ourselves, but removing the beliefs that conceal it. Separation is not a reality to be overcome. It is an illusion to be recognized. And once recognized, it dissolves, sometimes suddenly, sometimes gradually, but always inevitably, because the truth of your being is oneness, and truth has a way of revealing itself. Whenever the mind becomes still, let us gently acknowledge, then, that every feeling of distance from God is only a belief, and that belief can be released. As we continue, we will see more clearly what lies behind the personal sense of self and how the recognition of the true I becomes the doorway through which the presence reveals itself. Let us now turn to the most sacred point in all spiritual realization, the nature of the true I. For until we understand what this I is, we will continue to live from a false identity, and a false identity can never perceive the kingdom of God. When Jesus spoke the words, "Before Abraham was, I am," he revealed a truth far deeper than history, deeper than personality, deeper than time itself. He was not speaking of the man Jesus. He was speaking of the eternal I, the infinite identity that exists prior to birth and remains after the dissolution of the body. This I is the same I that is present within you now. It is not the personal self that says, I am tired, or I am afraid, or I am lacking. That self is the product of the human mind. The temporary mask worn by the infinite. The true I is silent, immortal, untouched by experience, unchanged by circumstance. It is the divine center of your being, the individualized expression of God as you, when you say, I, without attaching any adjective, any story, any label. You are touching this pure center infinite being appearing in the form of your consciousness. Joel Goldsmith dedicated his entire teaching ministry to helping students discern the difference between the I of the personal sense and the I of spiritual identity. The personal I is formed by memory, shaped by conditioning, and limited by fear. It lives constantly in reaction to the world. It struggles, strives, resists, and seeks approval. This personal, I believes in separation because it was born from separation. It is the sense of self the world gave you, and it is not your true identity, but deeper than the personal I, far deeper, there is the I that does not change. This is the I that witnesses your thoughts, yet is not made of thought. This is the eye that observes your emotions, yet is not touched by emotion. This is the eye that lives your life without effort, beating your heart, breathing your lungs, sustaining the flame of consciousness without your participation. This eye is the presence of God, expressed as your being. And every time you rest in that inner stillness where no thought defines you, you are resting in the I that Jesus revealed. When you speak from the personal self, you speak as a limited creature. But when you speak from the deeper I, you speak from the kingdom. You speak with the authority of truth, not because you claim power, but because power expresses through you as realization. Every healing Jesus performed, every teaching he offered, came from this recognition of the true I. He did not say, the Father and I are separate. He said, I and the Father are one. And Goldsmith understood this as the universal truth of all being, not a privilege reserved for the master alone. The spiritual path, then, is not the refining of the personal self. It is not the improvement of the human I. It is the recognition of the spiritual I that has always been present. When you stop identifying with the limited self, even for a moment, a profound shift occurs. You begin to sense a spaciousness within a quiet light, an unconditioned awareness. This is the birthplace of realization. This is the threshold of the kingdom. And this is the I that speaks, lives, and moves as the presence of God. The personal sense of self will continue to present itself through habit, through memory, through emotion. But as you recognize your spiritual identity more consistently, the personal I loses its authority. Its fears no longer govern you. Its desires no longer torment you. Its limitations no longer define you. And gradually, you live more and more from the truth that the real I is divine, infinite, and whole. Let us hold this gently. The true I of your being is the I of God, and when this becomes the center of your awareness, the illusion of separation fades, and the presence becomes a living reality in your daily life. As we continue our journey into the deeper understanding of spiritual life, let us turn our attention to prayer, perhaps the most misunderstood aspect of our relationship with the divine. For centuries, people have approached prayer as though they were separate individuals appealing to a distant God, hoping to attract favor, hoping to provoke action, hoping to persuade the infinite to intervene in the affairs of time and space. But all such prayer arises from the belief in separation, and therefore it cannot reveal the presence that is already within. Once you recognize that the true I of your being is one with the Father, prayer undergoes a complete transformation. It ceases to be asking. It ceases to be pleading. It ceases to be the attempt to change, alter, or influence external conditions. Instead, prayer becomes an inner resting in the truth of your oneness with the infinite. It becomes a quiet communion, a listening, an opening to what already is, rather than an effort to achieve what is not yet. Consider what this means. When you believe God is outside of you, your prayers naturally take the form of requests. But when you discover that God is the very consciousness of your being, you realize there is nothing to ask for. What would you request from a presence that is already expressing as your life? What would you beg from a source that is already flowing through your being as love, intelligence, harmony, and supply? To ask is to imply lack, and lack exists only in the belief in separation. As the sense of separation dissolves, so does the need to ask. Joel Goldsmith taught that the highest form of prayer is receptivity, receptivity to the truth that the kingdom is within, that the presence is here, that the infinite is expressing itself as the very activity of your consciousness. This prayer does not seek to change God or change the world. It seeks only to change our inner perception so that we may see what already exists in the invisible realm of spirit. When prayer becomes recognition rather than request, something subtle and remarkable begins to happen. The inner agitation that accompanies fear dissolves. The urgency that accompanies human desire fades. The longing that accompanies the sense of absence softens. In their place arises a quiet assurance, a stillness that is not passive but alive with presence. This assurance is the answer to prayer, not through words, not through signs, but through a shift in consciousness in which we know without doubt that the infinite is functioning as our very life. This kind of prayer is not confined to a moment or a ritual. It can occur while sitting in silence, certainly, but it can also occur while walking, while working, while speaking, while resting. It can occur in a moment of distress or in a moment of joy. For true prayer is not an activity of the human mind, but a movement of the heart, a turning inward to the sacred center where the divine and the individual are one. As this understanding deepens, we begin to see that prayer has nothing to do with words. Words can point, but they cannot awaken. The real prayer rises in the stillness when thought subsides and the presence reveals itself as one, indivisible, eternal. This is the prayer that heals, not because it changes conditions, but because it reveals the truth behind all conditions. It is the prayer that dissolves fear, not because it brings new strength from afar, but because it uncovers the strength that has always been present. Let us hold this gently. Prayer is not asking God to come. Prayer is recognizing that God is already here. It is not asking for supply. It is recognizing the infinite as the source of all expression. It is not asking for healing. It is recognizing the wholeness of the true I. When this becomes your way of prayer, your entire spiritual life shifts from striving to resting, from seeking to seeing, from effort to grace. Now, having seen that God is the consciousness of your very being, and that prayer is the recognition of this inner presence, let us consider what it means to live from this awareness in the ordinary movements of daily life. For spiritual realization is not something to be held only in moments of meditation or in the privacy of silence. It must become the atmosphere in which we walk, the ground upon which we stand, the foundation from which every thought and action arises. Living from inner oneness does not require great effort. It requires only remembrance, gentle, consistent remembrance that the presence is here. When you rise in the morning, before thought rushes to take hold of the day, pause for a moment, not to recite anything, not to practice anything, but simply to acknowledge the life that animates me is God. The intelligence that governs me is the infinite. The I that lives this day is not the personal I, but the spiritual I. This recognition sets the tone not by changing the world outside, but by aligning you inwardly with the truth that governs all things. As you move through your morning, preparing for work, caring for your home, interacting with those around you, you do not need to repeat spiritual truths constantly. Rather, you touch them lightly, as one touches a friend's hand, as one remembers silently, I and the Father are one. This is the practice of the presence. It is not an effort to bring God into the moment. It is the acknowledgement that God is already expressing as the moment. When Challenges arise, and they will. This is when the remembrance becomes most transformative. The human sense of self wants to react, to defend, to tighten. But in that instant, if you pause, even for a breath, and turn inward to the deeper I, something shifts. You recognize that the personal self with its fear is not the one facing the situation. The infinite, the presence, the I that I am, stands there instead. And from this inner stillness, clarity comes, solutions appear, wisdom arises without strain. You find yourself guided, not by calculation, but by intuition, by the quiet inner prompting that Goldsmith often called the activity of the Christ within. Living from oneness also transforms your relationships. You begin to see others not as separate individuals with conflicting needs and desires, but as fellow expressions of the same infinite presence. You do not need to change them, fix them, or control them. You meet them from an inner wholeness, and in that wholeness, harmony begins to reveal itself naturally. The less you strive for peace outwardly, the more peace emerges inwardly, and it is this inner peace that becomes the environment in which true relationship flourishes. In your work, too, oneness brings a new dimension. You stop approaching each task from the limited belief that you must carry the weight of responsibility alone. Instead, you realize that the infinite intelligence is the source of your ability, that the Father goes before you, that the real doer of all good work is the presence expressing through your consciousness. This lifts the burden of strain and replaces it with a quiet confidence, a sense of being carried rather than carrying. Living from oneness is not a mystical escape from life. It is a deeper immersion into life, free from the false sense of separation that clouds perception. You begin to see that everything around you, every encounter, every circumstance, every moment is an opportunity for recognition, an invitation to remember the truth of your being. And the more consistently you return to this remembrance, the more naturally grace flows through your experience. Let us hold this gently as we proceed. Spiritual living is not the attempt to add God to your life. It is the realization that your life is already the activity of God, and when this awareness becomes the quiet center of your days, you find that harmony, wisdom, and peace unfold without effort, for they are the natural expression of the presence when it is recognized. Let us now enter a deeper phase of our unfolding together, the discovery of silence, the sacred atmosphere in which the presence reveals itself. For all the words spoken in spiritual teaching, all the scriptures written, all the truths declared, point ultimately to a single place, the silence within, where thought subsides and the reality behind thought becomes known. It is in this silence that the kingdom is experienced, not as a belief or an idea, but as a living presence that permeates and sustains your very being. Goldsmith often said that silence is not the absence of sound. It is the absence of the personal sense of self. It is the atmosphere in which the ego relaxes its grip and the deeper I begins to shine through. Silence is the doorway through which you pass from the belief in separation into the recognition of oneness. And if you learn to rest here, even for moments, you will discover that God is not revealed through noise, not through emotional intensity, but through quiet recognition. This silence cannot be forced. It cannot be achieved by willpower or technique. It is approached gently, as you might approach a still lake. You settle into it, not by pushing thoughts away, but by refusing to cling to them. Thoughts come, you let them come. Thoughts go, you let them go. You make no effort to control them, no effort to silence them. Instead, you remain aware of the space in which they arise, the spacious, quiet field of consciousness that is always present beneath the surface activity of the mind. It is in that open space, between thoughts, beneath thoughts, beyond thoughts, that the presence makes itself known. Not through words, not through images, not through emotion, but through a subtle, living awareness, a sense of peace that is not dependent on conditions, a sense of completeness that does not come from achieving anything, a sense of being held, guided, and embraced from within. When Jesus went apart to pray, he was not reciting formulas, he was entering this silence. When the prophets withdrew into the wilderness, they were seeking this inner sanctuary. And when Joel Goldsmith sat in meditation before his classes, he was not preparing material, he was opening himself to the presence, allowing it to speak through him as spontaneous revelation. You, too, can enter this sanctuary, and you need not go to a mountaintop or retreat from the world. The silence is always here. It waits behind the noise of your thoughts, behind the activities of your day, behind the emotional storms that rise and fall. It is the ground of your being, and when you touch it, even briefly, you will find yourself renewed, not by effort, but by contact with the infinite that lives through you. Let us understand this clearly. Silence is not a practice you perform. It is a state you allow. You do not make silence happen. You create the conditions in which it can be felt. You simply grow quiet within yourself, gentle, receptive, open, and the presence reveals itself in its own way, in its own time, in its own rhythm. This revelation is not dramatic. It does not arrive with fanfare. It is more like a soft dawn rising behind your awareness, illuminating everything without announcing itself. And from this silence flows guidance. From this silence flows healing. From this silence flows intuition, wisdom, harmony, not because you asked for these things, but because the presence, once recognized, expresses its nature effortlessly. You begin to live not by outer striving, but by inner unfolding. This is the life of grace. This is the inner sanctuary. This is where God is found, not outside, not above, not beyond, but here, in the quiet depth of your own being. Hold this truth gently. The silence within you is the temple of the Most High, and whenever you enter it, even for a breath, you are touching the kingdom. As we come gently to the close of this time together, let us return once more to the simple truth from which everything we have spoken arises, the truth that God is not afar, that the kingdom is not distant, that the presence is not waiting to arrive. God is the very life that animates you, the very consciousness through which you hear these words, the very essence of your being, and all that has been shared today is but a call to return to that center where the infinite and the individual are recognized as one. The spiritual journey, when truly understood, is not a path of becoming, it is a path of uncovering. We are not striving to reach God. We are being gently led away from the belief that God is somewhere else. We are not building a bridge to heaven. We are discovering that heaven has always been the foundation of our existence. Every moment of quiet recognition, every pause in which we remember the deeper I, every breath in which we release the personal sense of self, brings the realization of what has never changed. I and the Father are one. As this truth settles into your awareness, life itself begins to take on a new quality. The pressures that once seemed overwhelming soften. The fears that once dominated fade. The striving, the searching, the anxious longing for answers gives way to a deeper trust, a quiet assurance that the infinite intelligence which governs all creation is the same intelligence living your life. And when you rest in this assurance, you find yourself carried not by effort, but by grace. I invite you, as you move forward from this moment, not to cling to the words spoken here, but to the spirit behind them. Words can point, they cannot reveal. The revelation comes only in the stillness, in the silent awareness of the presence within. It comes when you take a moment in the midst of your day to turn inward and remember the kingdom is here. It comes when you pause before reacting and allow the deeper I to guide you. It comes when you release the belief that you face life alone and recognize the infinite as your constant companion, your source, your very self. Let this teaching be a reminder, not a doctrine. Let it be a doorway, not a conclusion. The truth does not end with these words. It begins within you as you hear them, for the presence is alive, and it is ever seeking expression through your awareness. If you will simply allow it, quietly, gently, humbly, you will discover that the life you thought you were living alone is, in fact, the life of God unfolding as you. And so let us leave quietly, carrying with us not new ideas, but a deeper realization that God is not out there, that the kingdom is not far off, and that the true I of your being is the infinite, appearing as your consciousness. Live from this center, return to it often, and you will find that peace, harmony, wisdom, and grace rise naturally from within, revealing the truth that has always been. The presence is here, and it is I.